to do is to extend government to the level that it needs to be extended to. One of my biggest concerns about government today is that it's essentially out of touch with people in the real world. They talk to each other, we talk to each other, and there's very little communication between the inside the Beltway folks, either in Washington or Springfield, and the people who live in Main Street, USA. And I quite frankly think that's the biggest problem that we have. We don't have the degree of communication, we don't have the responsiveness, we don't have the accountability that is required, I think, to do an effective job, which is one of the very many reasons why there's about a 9% approval rating in Congress. Probably not a very much higher rated opinion among the in the state legislature, and that's unfortunate. So starting about, well, I mean, many years ago, certainly over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, this is probably, Randy, you can help me with the addition, this is probably our 50th, between 50 and 100 town meeting. And we want to do to let people know that whether it's Congressman Tim Johnson or Representative Wayne Rosenthal or Sandy Lighthizer, that we care about what you think. And if we don't come and see it, you're not going to give us an opportunity to let you know, let me know what you think. And so that's the reason I also want to introduce Scott Morano. Scott's our coordinator for this county and a good friend, and he and his family are here, and we appreciate you as well. Let me just spend like just 2 or 3 minutes talking about a few of the issues before the Congress right now, and then kind of leave it up to your questions that I might be able to fill in today. We've just finished the first year of the 112th Congress. We've dealt with issues ranging from our national debt and our budget and our appropriations to our involvement around the world in Afghanistan, Iraq, and otherwise, to farm policy, agricultural policy, to regulatory excess, to the whole effort to try to bring jobs and business climate that's more friendly than what it is now in the United States and arguably the state of Illinois. Because there is an impasse, and there is, in the Congress, the Senate controlled by President Reed, presidency, of course, President Obama, and Speaker Boehner in the House, there's oftentimes a division in terms of the direction we're headed. But I do believe that there is hope in the sense that I think the majority of Americans believe that we can make constructive changes, we can affect change in the United States and the world, and still meet people's needs. So those are just kind of a preliminary introduction about what we're concerned with right now and what I assume you're all concerned with as citizens. Because as I said, every town meeting I go to, whether you're concerned with the Farm Bill, or our involvement in Iraq, our national debt, or otherwise, you're also concerned with your own life. And you've got to have in your family, from time to time, or your friends, people who didn't get a VA claim properly adjudicated, or somebody who did a Social Security disability claim properly adjudicated. You might have an infrastructure need, or a need, or for example, the Hillsborough Hospital, which is looking to have a VA clinic expanded, or 255 and its route either through or not through, all the way to Carrollton and Jacksonville. Those are individual needs that don't make the headlines, but they're important to you. And as I've said repeatedly, if they're important to you, they're important to us. And that's where Randy and Dennis, and really Michael and James in a different sense, are so involved. They want to make sure that they do what they can to be responsive to your needs, your individual concerns. So you make sure as time goes along that you let us know what we can do to be responsive to. Just conclude by saying thank you. You're good citizens and being here. You got at least 2 Illini fans. Dennis Graff, of course, back there, played for Illinois, led the Big Ten in free throwing. His only negative thought about Montgomery County is when Gibson City High School, where he averaged 35 points a game, went to the state finals. They lost by 2 points to Raven Lincoln in the last second shot, so he's got mixed emotions about Montgomery County. Anyway, we appreciate Dennis being with us as well. So let me just stop there and see what questions or comments you might have, and I'd be more than happy to respond to anything. And quite frankly, if the country breaks down 91-9 in the belief that Congress is out of control, they're dysfunctional, and they're ineffective, I'm part of the 91%, not the 9%. I'm not going to stand here and try to defend a United States Congress that, in my judgment, is not responsive to people and whose public policy making, together with the administration, has been less than desirable. I will tell you that I try to stand out as an individual who tries to break the mold. I call on an average of 500 to 1,000 people a week at random just to ask what I can do to be of service to them. I stop at every restaurant, every bar, every business throughout the soon-to-be 33 counties that I'll represent or have or will represent, just to find out what I can do to be helpful to them. Henny and I went out many a day knocking on doors, and anywhere from Bloomington to Clinton to Monticello. I do think I could break the mold, but nonetheless, I get tarred by the same brush that the rest do, and I think a lot of that's legitimate criticism. And I want to make sure that I do what I can to be effective for you, and effective as a representative in the process. So, can you stop there and see what questions or thoughts you might have? Oh, I can say something, Mr. McMahon.
Well, what's on my mind is, at least if you watch the news, there's so much party bickering, and of course, being the election year coming up, I know that's part of the thing, but is it that bad, the way they show it over TV?
Let me give a long answer to a short question. I'm the chairman of the Center Aisle Caucus. It's a bipartisan group of about 40 to 50 congressmen whose stated purpose is civility where you disagree and compromise where you agree. And that's actually a pretty effective group. There's a whole lot of people who believe that. But there's at least 2 or 3 problems that confront that in a negative way. First of all, you have elections, and you have that whole process and the money that goes along with it. Number 2, you have redistricting around the country that tends to make heavily Republican or heavily Democratic districts where you have to play to the base. Essentially, if you're a Republican, you're going to play to the very conservative elements. If you're a Democrat, heavy Democrat district, you play to the far left. And so as a result, you don't get a lot in between. And I think the other thing, and I think you pointed this out in your question, is not the local media, but the CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS. It's not news when people are civil to each other. It's not news when people get along with each other. It's not news when you have the center outcome. You've probably never even heard about it. It is news when somebody calls someone else a liar. It is news when somebody calls somebody else a Nazi. Those are the sorts of things that make the news. And frankly, most members of Congress are not that striking. But at the end of the day, you get the extremes who control the rhetoric, and to some extent, the extremes who control the results. So, long answer to the short question is maybe not as bad as it's portrayed, but it's pretty bad.
It's frustrating.
It's frustrating to me. It's like Groundhog Day, the movie. Every two months, another shut down the government. Every 2 years, 2 months are going to happen. We're right on the brink of disaster. Every 2 months, we've got a bill that has to meet the deadline. At the end of the day, that's not good government. And I've tried to be an example of one who breaks that mold. But I'm only one person out of 435. I can't do it alone.
I think what's kind of interesting is like after 9/11, parties kind of disappeared and everybody worked together for a couple of weeks there, and then started falling back apart again. But
exactly.
I guess you need a crisis every so often just to get everybody to work together.
Well, it's unfortunate, and frankly, there's so many issues right now that we can just swept under the rug. The most classic example of that swept under the rug is our burgeoning national debt. Since 2009, our national debt has increased over $5 trillion. $5 trillion. That's more than the combined indebtedness of Washington through George H.W. Bush administrations combined. We borrow 43 cents of every dollar that we spend. And yet there doesn't seem to be the political backbone to take on the issue. The Ryan budget did it to a substantial extent, but even there wasn't the willingness to take on issues that are necessary to deal with that. And certainly this administration, and this Senate by any means are not in any way going to lose the opportunity to feed all their constituents, to spend more money. And at the end of the day, it may well be that the only hope, and I don't really mean this in the sense that I'm saying it, I don't want to say the only hope, but what's going to happen is we're going to hit rock bottom. And when you hit rock bottom, and many of these programs don't exist anymore, then people are going to realize we have to exercise fiscal responsibility. Very difficult dilemma.
Yes, so I want to thank you first for supporting the E-Verify bill.
Oh, yeah. By the way, that's a bill that cracks down on illegal immigration.
Exactly. Yeah, so electronic verification and other bills that are designed to stem that. Question regarding the borders in general. This, what's the gun scandal thing? Where the gun?
Oh, Fast and Furious?
Wow. I mean, that kind of is a slap in the face.
Kind of epitomizes things, doesn't it?
It really does.
I've been a strong opponent of illegal immigration. I took to the floor, in fact, made one of the leading floor speeches in opposition to the quote-unquote DREAM Act, that essentially is amnesty, and essentially would move other students ahead of your family for admissions to school and scholarship to the university. Michael Holmes, James Zen would go to the back of the line as compared to the children of illegal immigrants who take advantage of that status to the detriment of the United States. I'm not a nativist. I'm not a racist. But I am somebody who believes that we need to uphold our values, enforce our laws, and with the huge crush there is on social services, education, healthcare, and otherwise, the last thing we need to be doing is sending the message to people around the world that you can break our laws with impunity. And this administration is hell-bent, I think strictly for political reasons, to make sure that they cater to every group that they can, including illegal. I'm surprised they're in the constitutional amendment to give them the right to vote. Actually, they do. There is one city now that is actually, where is that, Danny? There's a city that's given them the right to vote.
In California.
Yeah, it's got to be in California. That makes the most sense. There is a city in California, our city, who's attempting to extend them the right to vote. Illinois actually now has a state DREAM Act. You talk about taxation without representation, that's representation without taxation. Good point. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I realized the agriculture lobby has spent over $133 million a year lobbying for farm subsidies. Farm subsidies at one time had a place that's been gone for many years. I've noticed that according to the farm subsidy database, just in the area code 62056 from 1995 to 2006, there's been over $32 million spent on farm, given away tax-free to farmers, with 76% of farmers receive farm subsidies. I spoke with
direct payments or countercyclical payments, or what?
These are over the years 95 to 2006. I spoke with Mr. Rosenthal last year or so. He's received over $409,209 from those years. I would like to know your stand on farm subsidies, because that's something that the U.S. could sure solve our debt crisis overnight if we do away with it. I'd like to know your stance.
I hope you'll understand. I'm not trying to be confrontational. I just want to respond, and I actually don't completely agree with you. The amount of money that goes to farm subsidies, commodity payments, is tiny compared to other elements of the farm bill. It's infinitesimal. And I'm just saying the amount of dollars is. I'm not saying it's a small amount of money, but as compared to the over $1 trillion a year that we're running in our deficit.
The $32 million basically to one zip code?
I'm just saying the nutrition, the rural development, the biotech research components of the Farm Bill comprise a food stamps, for example, a dramatic amount more of the total expenditures under the Farm Bill than the commodities program. I understand, and I think there's going to be an effort, because we got to be involved in shared sacrifice, some of your concerns. But I will say this, when we're having to deal with the American farmer has to deal in a competitive market with the European Union, who heavily subsidizes their producers. And when we're asked to feed the world, and when the farmers are beset with EPA regulations, with increasing real estate taxes, huge increase in the cost of doing business, purchases of land itself, and certainly equipment, chemicals, and otherwise. It really does kind of bring into fore the fact that there's got to be a level of a safety net, because we just can't lose the American producer and lose our ability to feed the world.
But that won't happen, though.
Well, I think it is
that's the same
words
that I got from Mr. Rosenthal, of which
all
of us.
Representative Rosenthal?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I just saw him about 20 minutes ago.
I wish I'd have seen him 20 minutes ago.
I will say that there is certainly going to be an effort this year in the Farm Bill to apply the concept of shared sacrifice. I think a lot of the points you made are accepted by most of the members of the Ag Committee and otherwise. But I will tell you that our national deficit, and I think you know this, our national debt and our annual deficit is a product of forces far, far, far beyond that.
Yeah,
and I want to do what I can to make sure that we have a strong agricultural economy, because as you know, when there's a strong agricultural economy, when farmers are prosperous, then they go to the Erstein and eat dinner. They go to the hardware store to buy their equipment. They pay real estate taxes to support the schools. So it's a multifaceted issue. I think you've raised some good points, but I'm not sure
they
it's
don't pay
easy.
sales tax on a lot of stuff, and then they write it off. I mean, it's just all one big vicious cycle. And you can go to farm.ewg.org, and you can find all all the stats are there. After all, it's the taxpayers' money. And
I'm just saying, if you look at the other side of the coin, the average American farmer, the average Illinois farmer, is dealt with an environmental protection agency who wants to call milk oil. We talk about the environmental protection agency who wants to regulate farm milk. We talk about a USDA rules that essentially prohibit pork producers from selling their products in the free market. And then you deal with real estate taxes that are in fertilizer costs and otherwise are dramatically higher than used to. It is a two-sided coin, I think all of us would admit. The question I got to ask you is, if you had $25 to bet this Super Bowl, I need to see the Packers out, who would you take, the Giants or the Packers or the Patriots?
well, Giants have a better team.
Okay. There you go, Tom. My brother and I bet $25 every month. He violates the law by gambling with each other. But thanks for your points. Good points. You as well. I knew Tom, Mr. McMahon here, his dad was a good friend of our Bill McMahon was a real good friend of our dad's. My dad's gone now too.
He touched on regulations, and I'm aware of the ones that they want to declare farm dust.
They still do.
Material.
Still do.
It's just insane. Is there an opposite movement to maybe do away with everything, start over? I mean, doesn't that make more sense?
Well, sure, we passed a number of bills in the House, not to do away with the EPA. I'm just doing this to push control of it. Not to do. Well, I'll take it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's Obama.
To the community center, Representative Johnson.
One of the reasons why I came tonight is to find out about you, since I don't know
Okay.
anything about
Okay.
it. Can
Another
you
guest.
give me some information on how you came into
Yeah,
politics,
sure.
where you've been, how you
Sure. This is my son, Robert, by the way, right back here. He probably tell you more about me than I can myself. I was born in Champaign, Urbana, Berlin Hospital, 1946. Went to school, Champaign Urbana Schools, University of Illinois. I owned a Baskin Robbins ice cream store and a some real estate holdings and practiced law. I was elected to city council in 1971 in Urbana, and the state legislature in 77. And I was there for some time. I was elected to Congress in 2000. This is the 3rd district now, this new district that I've had. I have been real active in criminal and civil justice issues as a state legislator, as a congressman, more oriented around ag issues and transportation issues. 9 children, Buzz is one of them, 11 grandchildren, soon to be 2 great-grandchildren. Might even have been born in the last few hours, but anyway, I'm expecting that. Fundamentally a conservative, but I guess I would consider myself a balanced conservative, pragmatic conservative. Pretty much a hands-on individual, hands-on candidate. I've had scores of elections and I've never lost one, so that's a little background. Since many people say you've been in office a long time, but it's about time to eliminate that. That's the best form of term limits are the people, and so I submit myself to the people. There are a lot of sacrifices involved in the job. I think a lot of you know that. There's a lot of sacrifices in the job and public service, but there's also a lot of many rewards. Balance it all.
And from what I gathered already, you were for the immigration issue. Are you pro-life?
Yes, pro-life, strongly support family values. I have a 100% voting record for 40 years. Virtually no exception on every one of the issues in that whole arena. My internet, you can go to James Dobson and AFA and otherwise, those are people that I have a lot of respect for and their background. What was your question before your phone rang?
I'm sorry, I invited the guest up.
That's okay, no problem.
Yeah, basically, regulation-wise.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're saying, regulation. Yeah, we passed a score of bills in the House to defang the EPA, to defang the various regulatory agencies. Not because all of what they're doing is so adverse, but because when you make public policy, it ought not to be made by unelected bureaucrats, it ought to be made by elected officials. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is far left, so is Barney Frank. But they're responsible to, or accountable, have to be, to 714,000 people. So they're going to be more willing to seek some kind of a middle ground than Lisa Jackson is at EPA, or Tom Vilsack is at USDA, because they're not responsible to anybody except the president. And to me, it's something we've been working on. As long as President Reed is in control of the Senate and Obama's in the White House, they're not going to defang their own agencies. And frankly, it's not just a Republican or Democrat issue. The Bush administration had many regulatory excesses too. Likewise with the deficit. The Bush administration and the Congress spent too much money. So while it's certainly been apples and oranges in some ways, I don't want to stand up here and say this is a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's an American issue. Scott Morano and I are good Republicans, but I think we would both say that we've got some faults within our own process that we need to address. Frankly, the greatest counterpoint to inside the Beltway, big money excess is this gentleman here, is local media who will let us know, will let the people know where we're coming from. And but for that, we'd be doomed.
Jim, another question, how long do you think it's going to take to get the economy really rolling again? Or what's it going to take?
Well, I think one of the things it's going to take is more certainty in terms of taxes, in terms of regulatory policies, in terms of incentives. I think you got to have more certainty in the process, and we don't have that right now. I think it's going to take. I hate to keep going back to this issue. I think it's going to take you have to take a quote-unquote free market position to the marketplace, so to speak, and that has redounding effects on the whole economy. I don't see unemployment being down 8.3% or maybe up to 9.1%. That's unacceptable. And as long as we have a national debt that continues to grow, then I think that we have a iceberg waiting for the Titanic.
Then you can talk underemployment.
Underemployment, you're probably talking about 20%. This is the most educated high school student I've ever met in my life. Right here. He came out and asked me questions I couldn't even answer. We appreciate it. came up and met me at the Hillsborough parade, and I just want you to remember, because someday I'm going to be president. You probably will. You're just not old enough yet. You got to be 35, man. To ask you, we gonna beat Minnesota tomorrow? No, we're gonna beat them tomorrow. Beat them Saturday.
Don't we play Saturday?
Yeah.
There?
Yep.
We'll lose.
We need to win that game.
I think you had a question.
I was just ask about, we've seen a lot of the news about Iran, and how it's, that it's getting a little bit escalated with that. The possibility of sanctioning for the
Yeah.
trade.
Right, sanctioned trade, right.
But I didn't know what, if that had taken effect, or I heard there's multiple loopholes in it to get out.
Yeah, I was actually one of the sponsors of the bill. Sure, the loopholes. Eventually, when you're talking about the executive branch of the government, Department of Defense, Congress can only do so much. You've got to have the Department of Defense and the infrastructure, military infrastructure to enforce what we have. It's difficult. I'm the person who doesn't believe that America needs to send its troops all over the world to become the police officer of the world. It costs money, it costs lives, and I think it's ultimately counterproductive. But if there's a nuke in Iran, I guess the jury is out. Anything else, anybody?
Payroll tax.
Yeah. I was actually one of 7 Republicans who voted with the Democrats to get this ball out of our court temporarily. There's a lot of faults with the unemployment compensation system, with the payroll tax cuts, as well as the Medicare doc fix. But you don't do it on a 12-hour notice. And I continue to say we cannot continue to have these crises that go right down to the end. I think the payroll tax, when it expires here in February, will be extended probably through a 12-month period, another 10 months. The feeling is that it will generate money for the economy. The downside to that is, the reason I voted against it in its first form was because it drains money from the Social Security Fund. So that's a big deal. Unemployment compensation, there has to be a limit at some point, and it can't morph into a welfare system. But when we have almost 90% unemployment, nearly 19% underemployment, we have to put a finger in the dike, at least temporarily. So I think all those things in the doctor fix and Medicare will probably be extended for at least a 10-month period, would be my guess. But as I say, there's a lot of times issues like the Hillsborough Hospital, the VA hospital over there, or the 255, or otherwise that don't make the headlines, but as you know, they're awful important in both communities.
Do you have an update on Senator Kirk?
Yeah, Randy, why don't you read that? Just don't read the whole thing, just read the exit of it. You got that with you on Senator Kirk? Mark's a good friend of mine. I came in the same class. We don't always vote the same, but he's a big guy.
I have a statement here. Senator Kirk continues to progress as expected and remains in serious but stable condition this morning with no change in his neurological or physical prognosis. Late yesterday, we performed a common surgical procedure to create more space around the senator's brain in order to accommodate the expected peaking of swelling. The procedure, which removed 2 small pieces of tissue previously destroyed and rendered non-functional by the senator's stroke, was completely successful and without complication.
That's obviously a tragedy and inexplicable in many ways. Mark swims every day. He works out. He eats well. He's not an abuser of alcohol. He doesn't smoke. As far as I know, I'm sure he does not use drugs. And yet, this can happen to him. So I guess there's a certain component of either stress of the job and or genetics that kicked in. So our prayers are all with Mark. He's a fine guy. As a matter of fact, some of you probably don't know that Mark Kirk, I don't want to say grew up in, but I think he was born in Champaign, Shadowwood Trails Courts, and he grew up part of his youth in Sullivan, Illinois, which isn't all that far from here. So he's got a downstate soul. I don't trust most of those Chicago politicians. Most of those Chicago politicians, the very reason we don't have concealed carry, which we need to have in Illinois, I've introduced the National Illinois Reciprocity Gun Act, which would extend concealed carry to Illinois. But nonetheless, in the state legislature, I think Wayne Rosenthal would tell you this, he's been an advocate. You may not agree with him in those things, he's certainly been an advocate of that. Wayne would tell you virtually every state legislator downstate, Republican and Democrats, supported concealed carry. If Chicago doesn't, we lose. Yes, sir.
I heard a speech last year about the estate tax for FFA or public speaking, and I just wondered if there's any progression on the Bush-era tax cuts and when that would come up in Congress.
Yeah, they're coming up they're going to expire relatively soon, and I think that certainly Obama will never sign an extension of a lot of these Bush-era tax cuts. So I think it's going to be a scalpel rather than meat axe as long as he's in the White House. I think the death tax is a tremendously unfair tax. It taxes income, oftentimes capital gain, and then in its final form, so to speak. But I think the best we can practically expect is to have the extension of the exemption as it is with the lower rate. So we'll see how that plays in. Again, that goes into the question of what's certain and what's not, and how we can. Mr. McMahon asked the question, what about the economy? Well, one of the problems is we don't have certainty in the economy. Did you ask that?
I was just going to say maybe you could propose a bill to make everything north of I-80 another state.
They did that. Adam Brown did that. Representative Adam Brown and Bill Mitchell from Decatur have that proposed.
I was going to give this copy of the Constitution to Tommy and Pacer, but I think they already know it. So.
They can give us a lecture on it. By the way, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself to you guys, but thanks for coming in. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for being here too.
I don't think that we have so much a tax problem in Washington as we have a spending problem.
Oh, it is.
We're spending way more than we're bringing in, but we don't want to quit.
43 cents of every dollar is borrowed. The entitlements alone consume almost as much as all of our revenues. We continue to have a stimulus 2, stimulus 3, which increased unemployment, indebted us to the tune of $1 trillion in a whack. And there is no self-discipline. And frankly, it's politically expedient to spend a lot of money. I go to this group, and this group, and this group, and this group, and say, here's some money. Oh yeah, who doesn't want money? Who doesn't want money for health care? Who doesn't want money for advancements for seniors or research in certain diseases or whatever it might be? All those are worthy, but collectively, they indent us beyond what we can bear. And so does somebody have the political will, the backbone, to say no to these groups? And at this point, there seems to be a backbone of jelly, at least among a certain level of political occupants.
The takers are way outnumbering the givers. Those paying taxes are being way outnumbered by those that are just sucking.
My former chief of staff, Jerry Clark, who's, you may know, some of you know, he's actually from Pawnee and areas just north of here, he used to call it the taxpayers and the tax eaters. Now, I'm not suggesting that tax eaters are bad people. I'm a tax eater. I live on tax dollars. Scott Morano works at the prison. Nothing wrong with that. Well, we need to make sure that we're wise in where we're using our dollars.
Congressman, one thing I'd like to share with you on the price of gasoline, why it fluctuates so much. Could you do this?
You know, I've had that's probably one of the 5 most common questions I've gotten over my career in government. There are laws prohibiting price gouging and consorting to fix prices and otherwise. And perhaps they're not being as enforced as effectively as they could. But I guess I've come to the place now where I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not sure that I believe there is price gouging. I'm just of the same bewilderment as you do. I don't know why they vary so much. I'd certainly like to look at that, but I don't think any of us are going to advocate for price controls. Because as soon as you have that, you have supply problems, you have basic issue whether you believe government ought to impose prices on people. So it's a befuddling question, and I face the same thing. We drive in Urbana, Tom and I, we go by my favorite gas station down in East Urbana, and it has gas for 9 cents, or sometimes 29 cents less than the one downtown. So you can't figure that. I don't know.
What is the breakdown on that? For example, the $3 a gallon, is the higher the gas it is, the more tax, the more federal tax that they get? Is that right?
I think that's right, yeah. Is that right, Denny? I think that's correct. These are.
Sounds right,
Yeah, I think so. I think that's correct. Illinois is one of the few states in the union that has a tax on a tax, too. Yes?
Part of that question is the excessive and unreasonable EPA regulations.
Well, we just talked about that, absolutely.
In my understanding, that doubles the price of energy, including gas. They can oil, but the regulations large doubles the price, basically.
Yeah, I think we just talked about that. What regulatory excess has done to our economy is devastating.
And then I have a book I could forward in with Art Robinson, Oregon Institute of Science and Technology. He's one of 20,000 scientists who signed against the Kyoto Treaty.
Oh, yeah.
This has been excessive and unreasonable.
Why don't you get the opportunity? Randy will give you her card. Why don't you get that to us? I'd like to see it.
Okay, sure, I'll give you the.
Sure, I appreciate it.
Anyone who wants it, I got electronic.
Okay, thanks a lot. We appreciate that. Anything else? Huh?
On the issue of the economy, do you personally feel that if we were to create more public works projects, that it would stimulate the economy, or do you?
I don't think, no, I don't think so. I don't think you can just create jobs. I don't think the government should be the source of partnering with the private sector and creating an environment that's friendly for jobs to grow, but not creating jobs per se. Now, do I believe that a strong highway bill would be good for America? Absolutely. People who work building roads and bridges and culverts, it would be spectacular. But in terms, I think that was maybe your question, maybe I didn't understand it as well. But in terms of creating jobs, I think it's the private sector's job, for the most part, to create jobs. And I think the government needs to create an environment where those jobs are fruitful to be created.
What are your thoughts on that Canadian pipeline thing?
The XL pipeline? I support the XL pipeline. I found it incredible that the president made an address, speech the other day. I was in the chamber to at the one time say that our focal point of our energy policy is to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. That was his statement. And at the same time, he's put a total quietus on development of nuclear energy. He has now canceled the XL pipeline, which would have been a dramatic effect on in a positive way for energy independence, and basically has driven all natural gas, petroleum to in offshore areas to other nations. And so, how on the one hand you can be in favor of reducing dependence on foreign oil, and on the other hand say we're going to cancel the XL pipeline and not allow Clinton power plant to have a second phase is just counterintuitive.
Well, is that canceled or is that tabled?
It's tabled, but effectively he's canceled it for now. And now I understand they're going to figure out an alternative route, so all the advantages and jobs and otherwise will go south on us.
See, that's my gripe there, because I like to go green, don't get me wrong, but if there's birds in danger, those birds will go somewhere else. I'm not worried about the birds.
I don't even believe that was the issue. I think it was a symbolic. I've got a pretty strong environmental voting record. In fact, I would say I'm one of the stronger environmental supporters in the Congress. But that doesn't have to be divorced from sound growth. Exactly as you say, I think it was largely symbolic, largely political, and 100% unfortunate.
Do you feel personally that Bush tax cuts were productive as
Yeah.
opposed to counterproductive?
Yeah, I do. I think that we enjoyed almost unparalleled growth from 2001 through our dip in 2008, which was largely pushed by the housing crisis and not by tax cuts. Are there areas where we're going to have to retrench because it's partly a revenue issue? Sure. But at the same time, I think they were tremendously beneficial to the economy, and I would hate to see them flat out expire and interject more and more uncertainty into the system.
I
an accountant, catering small businesses, doing their accounting plus taxes. What is your feeling towards tax reform, major tax reform,
Well,
flat tax, that sort of thing? Do you think
I think we got
it's talked about every 4 years,
I think we-
obviously. Is there anything on the horizon that you?
Well, there is. I'm open to suggestions in terms of where we go with respect to a substantial tax reform. I'd like to see the details. But the flat tax has a lot of merit to it. Well, we appreciate you coming. You're good citizens. I'm very, very blessed to have people like you here. Thanks to my family and my staff, and thanks to you all for being here. And I look forward to seeing you soon. God bless.